The American Empire is an obsession of mine because I spent the first 44 years of my life inside a quintessentially American grown sect. My sect wrote into doctrine colonization, domination, social hierarchies, gender roles, white supremacy, westward expansion. Our scriptures taught me about just wars, God sanctioned genocide, divine authority, and other components of imperialism that again were made into a religion. These scriptures specifically outline white people from ancient Jerusalem sailing across the sea to what is now the Americas and settling, colonizing, building an empire, and eventually waging war against the cursed brown skinned people who God had ordained them to destroy. I left this sect called the Mormon Church over 7 years ago. And as I deconstructed my religion, it became very obvious to me that all of these religious faith concepts that I'd been taught were actually the components of imperialism. So you can see why it's my obsession. Now that I'm on the other side of Christian nationalism, I love to pick apart the things that I accepted as truth and decode them, understand the role that they played in my life and the larger role that they play in society. I'm worried right now that we are so focused on Erica Kirk's weird outfit and Trump's ballroom that we're zooming in too closely to these tiny details, the minutia of Christian nationalism, and we are missing the bigger picture. The bigger picture of everything that's going on right now is the collapse of the American empire. And those who are part of the same pipeline that I was part of, the Christian nationalists, the white supremacists, the American Zionists, they are currently fighting with everything that they have to save this empire from dying. And we're just worried about Erica Kirk's hat. Yesterday, I sat down with a brilliant Oxford student and professional propagandist. His name is Will. He goes by Willz Talks. And we dove into that intersection that I'm so obsessed with, religion and politics, and the bigger picture of the role that MAGA and Turning Point USA and Mormonism all play in this crumbling American empire. I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I know there's a lot of great stuff out there on YouTube. I always appreciate you stopping on one of my videos. My name's Jenny. I'm former MAGA, former Christian nationalist, Mormon trad wifey, white supremacist, alt-right, and I now live and breathe just basically to fight against all of that. So in the spirit of doing that, I have an incredible guest that I am so excited to talk to today. I think I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning watching your videos this morning. So it was a great way to start the day. So, hi, Wills. Welcome to my
Hello.
channel.
Hi, incredible is such a high compliment. Yeah, I'm Will's Talks. You can find me mainly on Instagram and TikTok, and slowly YouTube. I'm getting video essays out every so often, and I do a lot of primarily anti-imperial leftist work. But obviously, that comes into what's happening now with the rise of fascism in America, which is imperialism come home to roost. So anti-fascist work, focusing on things as we were talking about earlier, in Gaza and across the Middle East, because learning fascism abroad teaches you how to fight fascism here. And obviously in America, that looks like a lot of Christian nationalism.
So, Christian nationalism, that used to be my home. I do want to give you a little warning right off the top here that, we're going to talk about great things. You have some brilliant thoughts, but in the spirit of full disclosure, whatever we talk about today, 10% at least of the comments are going to be about my hair. And let me tell you why. Because in the not very distant past, I had long blonde hair almost down to my waist. And I got comments from people that it was MAGA hair. Some people called it Utah curls, the Utah wave, Republican hair. And I recently chopped it off. And this is the hot talking point on my channel right now. So thank you, everybody who loves my hair. 10% of the comments are going to be like that. And do you know why I had the Utah wave, Will?
No, why? What is this
Because I
tea?
was a Mormon.
Oh,
And
yes. Okay.
I was the double. So I was not only Mormon, but I was Mormon and MAGA. So when I saw your video where you said the word Mormon quite a bit. And it started off really sweet because you have a little missionary girls dancing. When I saw that, you instantly grabbed me. So I want to play that video for everybody. And then will you share what you're thinking?
This is a bunch of Mormon women celebrating where they're being sent off for their mission trip. And what is a cute trend for some people is neocolonialism for everyone else. Because I want you to just take a second with clear eyes and view what the LDS Church is. It is a cult of American Christianity. It, more than almost any other sect of Christianity, and the Christians are not going to like me, is specifically tailored to spread Americanism. America is the one that has the Garden of Eden in Mormon mythology. America is where Jesus came back to in Mormon mythology. So a bunch of American missionaries going across the world and spreading the message of what is effectively American centricity and American mythology is a very effective route to proselytizing, not just for the Mormon Church, but for the normalization and eternal nature of the American state. And a couple of things. Yes, I'm going to call it Christianity because I don't care what mythological people disagree with others, right? Like, I was Unitarian. That's a Christian sect just as much as anything else, even if it doesn't follow the Nicene Creed. Number two, I think every Christian sect that goes out and evangelizes is nasty and should not do that. I think this is coercive, and I think it's coercive both against, like, the essentially children. They're ostensibly 16 to 20 that are doing it, but they're quite young, and they're sent on mission trips to reaffirm, right, their own beliefs and to challenge them into circling back into that echo chamber. And, of course, the people that they are pressuring to join a Christian cult. And three, it is desperately related to capital. The Mormon Church is one of the wealthiest independent religious bodies in America, and it has a protected status, especially in Utah, because it effectively runs one of the 50 states. And so while it might be normalized within certain people's religious experience to celebrate it like this, I'm under no obligation to respect anyone's religious experience. And I very often disrespect people like Catholics and evangelical Christians who are actively like burning this country to the ground. It is still important to recognize the role that this has in not only spreading specifically Mormonism, right, but the role that it has in spreading the cult of America. If you believe, even for an instance, right, even if you don't fall into Mormonism, but you are exposed to these ideas of Americanism being almost conflated with divinity, America being the home of the last prophet, then you are much more likely to not see it for what it is, which is an entirely falsified settler colonial state built upon the bones of the Native Americans that Joseph Smith lied about.
Okay.
Brutal, isn't it?
So here's why it was brutal to me, because deep inside of me, I still have that Mormon girl, right? And I keep my Book of Mormon right here in my studio, right next to my office, as well as my Mormon diaries and my patriarchal blessing and all this stuff. So you start the video all sweet, and I actually thought that you were going to be an LDS creator. I thought this was a pro-Mormon thing, and here's all that, there's so many of them, and I follow all of them. They pop up on our feeds all the time, right? So you start off with little missionaries, and they are so sweet and they are so cute. And these are 18-year-old girls who are going out to make the world a better place, because the world is falling apart. And were it not for American Christian missionaries going out and fixing it all, wouldn't we crumble to bits? But then you get dark all of a sudden, because you dive right into how these little girls going out into the world and doing what they're doing is...
Yeah, it's neocolonialism, it's imperialism, and the image it brought me of. Have you seen the recent *Handmaid's Tale*?
Oh yes,
like re-up. So the Pearl Girls. Like I've been on this kick. I assume most people haven't seen my content for other things, but I do this with IDF.
Please watch it. Please watch it.
Where
stop and
I've been
go
going
watch
down and finding these like girl boss American military propaganda, this girl boss IDF propaganda, and there's this magic that's happened in the past 2 years of people being the allure of nationalism has fallen off of their eyes with Israel, right? And what I'm trying to do is take that same cynicism and undermining of these structures of power and apply them to structures of power in America, like the wealthiest. I found out after I posted that video that the Mormon Church is the single wealthiest religious organization in the world, with upwards of 260 to 300 billion dollars. So trying to take this destruction of those, like when it's happening in Handmaid's Tale, you're kind of ready to say this is bad, this is gross, this is weird. But when it's happening with evangelical Christians in America, it doesn't become so clear. And so yeah, part of that is not only to kind of explain those structures of power, but also it's a lot of vibes, a lot of this is what it looks like, how it feels. And people started to get those vibes away in certain contexts, and we're just trying to expand those because they exist for a reason, to uphold the power that was outlined in that video.
So the vibes being like, I'm just thinking of little missionary girlies, and I was once an 18-year-old
Yeah.
Mormon girl, and I was so sweet. I have another friend who was in a different cult, and I don't remember what her cult was, but in theirs, they talked about flirty little fishies, and she was fishing for men. And there was actually a scripture in the Bible, I will make you fishers of men. And so she was to be sexy. And I think that there was actually some actual hanky panky that happened in their cult. And that was to go out and proselyte to the world and bring them back and push their religion on others. So that's what I felt like when I was a little 18-year-old girl myself living in the Mormon church. I was the light shining on the hill. I would wake up in the morning, Will, and I would get on my little knees and I would pray to Mormon God that he would make me that light on the hill, that my light would so shine to men that they would see my good work, glorify my Heavenly Father, and come in the Mormon gospel. I lived to convert other people. And I genuinely felt like I was making the world a better place by doing that, because I pictured that like everywhere in the world was just falling to pieces. And the only thing holding it together was the true gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's always very hard to articulate outside of other contexts, this feeling, because I think a lot of people have their communities that they feel kind of these warm and fuzzies with, or feel like they belong in, even if it's a little weird, right? It's always going to be weird from an outsider, right? Pride parades, I'm a gay man, proud. Pride parades might look a little weird to an outsider. I was Unitarian, right? Unitarian church, right? Which I still have a lot of love and affection for, even if we have issues. It looks a little weird, but when you're inside of it, you understand it. I talk a lot about like frats and sororities and how fundamentally strange and odd they are, and how they're really trying to indoctrinate you into, if you look at the history of frats and sororities, white supremacy of America. And that's what we're getting on with the Mormon church. The Mormon church is an inherently racist institution, right? It is fundamentally American in how centric around capital it is, in how fundamentally white supremacist it is, how American centric it is, and how evangelical it is. And these have real political consequences, namely with them owning the state of Utah, but also being a real political force on the national stage. I get a lot of comments sometimes being like, it isn't that deep, right? And my answer to that always is, well, if it wasn't that deep, then they wouldn't spend $1 billion trying to make it look so nice, right? There's a reason that, if you're in a frat or sorority, you look a certain way. There's a reason that the IDF spends billions of dollars in propaganda to make their, men or women look sexy dancing in Tel Aviv clubs, right? That was a concerted propaganda effort. And there's a reason that certain Mormon missionaries have certain presentability standards. And it's not because it doesn't matter, right? If it didn't matter, they wouldn't spend money doing it. It clearly does. And clearly then destroying it also matters. And that's the thesis of a lot of that. Or the overall.
So talk to me about that, those presentability standards. If we're focused on Mormons, and I think that certainly there are some other crossovers, the evangelicals, the Baptists, you think about everybody within Turning Point USA right now, Erica Kirk, the whole MAGA movement, anybody who is a MAGA Christian. When you look at them, there is that certain vibe. So what is that? Explain that to me. If you were to describe to somebody, let's say that I just landed from Mars and I've never seen, and you are going to explain the vibe of these proselyting evangelical Christian nationalists. What is that vibe?
That's like the fundamentally difficult thing to describe, because it's so. I grew up in the South. I grew up in North Carolina around the Southern Baptists.
Oh, nice.
Gay men around Southern Baptists we're besties, guys.
We had a gay friend in South Carolina, and he was so bullied, like literally bullied by everybody.
I do not like the Southern Baptist Church. I am not respectful to the Southern Baptist Church ever. I don't think I owe them that. There are a few things, right? And a good example is in the South, we have like debutante balls, which isn't a huge culture, right? It's a culture of, golf club, of like, country clubs, etc. It's the structure of aesthetics in culture, right? Like there's a reason I'm wearing a shirt and I have to wear a shirt. It really goes down to that basic level. There's a reason that people in Muslim countries wear burqas or hijabs or niqabs, right? And there's a reason there are different, women couldn't go outside without a shirt on and I could. So down to that basic level, right? I'm a really radical lefty, right? I really think a lot of this is socially constructed, down to the point of everything you're doing is a lot of performance. And there's a reason I present this way, because people listen to me more, right? I'm a white man with blue eyes, wearing a blue shirt, looking somewhat presentable. People hear me more. And so take that and extrapolate it to you're a stranger knocking on someone's door. How do you get them to trust you? Right. And if it's a place that's been colonized or been predominantly white, you do that by performing what those white traits are. Right. And there are certain things within white supremacy and within Western culture and within European culture that are respected. And there are certain things that are not. And it's entirely arbitrary. It's a social messaging. The Mormon church does a fantastic job of anyone in their mind, I bet, if they've ever seen it, can imagine a Mormon missionary. Right.
Yes.
They have their white pressed shirts. Right. So they
The
don't
girls have
want
the
to look like the
dresses.
cult. Exactly. Exactly. You ever see the show Midsummer? Um,
I'll go watch it.
oh, okay. It centers around like a cult, and it's a lot of cult imagery has this effect that the person is trying to instill in you of uncanny valley, right? With those exact values. So it's too white of dresses, right? It's too happy of people, right? And so the reason that's uncanny is because we've all seen that thing. We've all gone to a Catholic church and we've seen people dressed in white and we've seen people dressed in lace because we're familiar with it. It can get to a point of being uncanny. So performing that matters to giving you power. And we see this in a lot of different things. And it's a way that they enforce, for example, like anti-queerness, right? This is a very straight person outfit, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't think anyone would clock my tea unless I open my mouth. But they enforce that also with like grammar, right? I'm a dyslexic man and I struggle with grammar, and that faces real issues because of classism and my failure to perform whiteness.
Well spoken you are, the more upper class you are. That's typically
Yes.
something. What are the big five that indicate your wealth? Because anyone can go out now and you can get a credit card and you can buy cute clothes. You can even go into debt and buy yourself a cute car. So that stuff's not it. It's grammar, it's teeth, because if you're lower class, you don't have access to orthodontics and dental care and things like that. Typically, you may have dental care, you may even have free dental care, but you don't have the orthodontics. It's weight. So right now, that's the thinness. You have the ability to go out and buy the gel ones and everything, and hair care. There's a big five. I don't remember what the other one was. Teeth, grammar. Anyway, some of that stuff.
Yeah.
That is stuff that in your education, right? So I can be on food stamps and I can figure out a way that I'm going to find myself like that nice car. I'm going to buy a junky old Mercedes, but then I'm going to smile and I'm going to have crooked teeth, and that's going to be a tell. And that grammar is a big deal. So your dyslexia makes you seem like you're in a different category, but yet you're an Oxford graduate, correct?
Yeah. I was about to say, like, this is like gay men tend to perform quite well because gay men, I think the accent that you get being gay sounds a little British, and I think that actually upclasses some gay people. I would love to know people's view on this thesis because I think it's true. I think when you hear gay man, you're like, oh, he sounds a little proper. Oh, is he? And Americans view Europe and Britain as like the higher class, right? That's where we're obsessed with the royals.
Wait, hold on. That is so true. Every gay friend of mine, I automatically think that they're like so smart, but part of it is they are more animated in the way they speak, and they're just so smart. I don't know. So
yeah, there's a lot of theories. There's like scientific papers written on why specifically gay white men tend to outperform their counterparts. It's really complicated, but that's one of them. But the reason I bring this up, I think to a random listener, it might sound like we're just yapping, which we are. We love yapping, go yapping. But it also it gets into this issue of like it's not that deep or everything's related, right? And I spend a lot of time on right-wing Twitter. I spend a long time on right-wing YouTube because I want to deeply understand my enemies. Right. And what you realize when you're deeply understanding neo-Nazis or deeply understanding neo-fascists is they care so much about this. This is where the red meat obsession comes from, right? This is where the like looks maxing comes from. They understand the class system that they are setting up. It is necessary upon us to understand the class system that we're trying to break down, so we can observe it. And things like teeth and things like racism built in and things like fat phobia and ableism, they use it as markers, right? And being hypersensitive to that isn't like they try and gaslight you into believing it's like very deep, but they care so deeply about it, right? If a looks maxer becomes disabled, his life feels like it's ruined because he's a eugenical labelist, right? And those aren't just slurs, they're accurate descriptions.
Because the performativeness does what? So I don't have all of the research that you have, but I lived it from the inside out, right?
Yeah.
So when I was 18, 19, 26, when I was a young Mormon, newlywed and then wife, and I was obsessed with getting the extensions done, and I had my teeth bleached by my dentist to the point that they were practically falling out, and the eyelash extensions and all this stuff, right? When I was looks maxing as a female within the Mormon church and all of that performance femininity as a trad wife, what was that doing? What was that doing for the organization?
Yeah. Well, I think if I had to like think generally, people with privilege are always looking for excuses to keep privilege, right? And there's always a moderate, and this is something I hit on my channel a lot. I talk about coloniality, right? Imperialism. That's the specific nature of privilege I tend to talk about. But this applies to a lot of wealth and privilege. There's always a debate, right? We're either abetting the people that we are trying to oppress. We need to keep them calm. We need to chill them out, or we're stealing from them and taking from them, and that angers them. And I would
Wait, will
typically
you
label
say
that
that
the
again? Will you say
yeah,
that again?
there's
A
a
little bit
dynamic of
slower.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
How are we
So
oppressing? We're using what tools to oppress?
So the dynamic, this is described by Sakai in Settlers, The Myth of the White Proletariat. Fantastic book. People should read it. Very interesting.
I'll link
But
that in the
there's a
description.
absolutely. So there's a liberal conservative dynamic in wealth and power and imperial societies. The liberal dynamic is the dynamic to say, hey, let's take the like the slave South, right? So the
Mhm.
pre Civil War South. There was a dynamic between if we abuse and harm and extract from slaves too much, right? Offer them no alternative. Haiti is also a good example of this. Then we might have a slave revolt on our hands. Okay. And then there was the alternative, conservative, saying, no, 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 infinite drive to profit, right? We need to extract more and more and more. This was so that, there are different times that this contradiction is in peak. Once you understand that dynamic, I think the point a lot of this stuff, visual appearance, in that case, race codes that they built up, it was using an excuse to say, okay, here's how we're going to divvy up privilege on that very delicate balance between abating the people we're oppressing and oppressing and extracting from them. That's the very abstract way. And so very literally is if I'm the Mormon church and I have $300 billion, I need to very clearly be able to demarcate between who can get access to that money and who can't. And if the third child of an ex-Mormon can't get access to it, I need a damn good reason, because otherwise they're going to come after the Mormon church, right? And I need to, so I'll take care of the people I need to take care of because they're a threat to me. And a lot of those indicators do that in weird ways that have been institutionalized in society. So that's my big thesis on it.
Oh, that's so fascinating. So these sweet little Mormons, they're going out into the world and they are going to all over the place. My son served a mission in Texas, and it is interesting just how much of his mission prep was less spiritual and more external. It was he had to have this certain amount of suits, and they had to be specific suits. He couldn't have a pink suit or a dusty blue suit. It had to be navy blue or black or
No, we
gray,
wouldn't
and
want
he
an
could
appearance of queerness. No, no, no.
no, yeah, no color whatsoever. He did get to be a little bit more flamboyant in his ties, and my son is very expressive in his fashion, so that was where he kind of played around with things. And then the hair had to be cut like every 2 weeks, so it was like tight and military precision, and it was kind of heartbreaking because my son has platinum colored, curly, beautiful hair, and getting that mission cut right before he left. So a lot of our preparation, it wasn't even like make sure that you're saying your prayers and your heart is pure so that you can go out into the world. I mean, I guess they assumed that he'd already done that. It was make sure that you have 7 pairs of black socks and 7 pairs of navy blue socks and get your hair cut and all that stuff. So he goes out into the world, and I have, family members who've gone to, let's see, Chile and Brazil. One of my sister-in-laws was in Brazil. I had a Mormon boyfriend. He was my fiance, actually, and I sent him off to Columbus, Ohio, kissed him at the airport, never saw him again, married somebody else instead. So heartbreaking, heartbreaking
Yeah.
story. But they go all over the place, and they're making the world better, correct? Because everybody needs white Christian mythology.
Well, that seems to be the belief. And that's such an interesting observation that you note, which is when it came to the practicality, it wasn't about the belief, right? When your boots are on the ground, it's not like they'll be convinced if you know the right verses of the Book of Mormon. They'll be convinced if you represent the faith the best, right? And this is where I'm really cynical, but I also like this applies to a lot of religion, Mormon missions, is it's not so much about the religion, is it? It's not so much that the higher ups in any religion believe that religion more than others. It's more materially, if you have power, if you have influence, there's a way that you maintain that influence and there's a way you lose it. And one of the ways you lose it is, someone having a silly suit on while representing the Mormon church, right? So one of the
Hmm.
ways you lose it is someone saying something wrong or offensive or harmful. Look at the Catholic Church, right? That destroyed the Catholic's reputation when they had a lot of, incidents of misconduct. And it should. right? So they are materially incentivized not to get the most zealous people, but to get the most powerful people and to maintain that power militantly. And so I think that's such an interesting observation you point out in your specific example. And I hate to be cynical, but cynicism tends to align with reality quite a lot. And this is my
Yes, it
thesis on a
does.
lot of Christian nationalists. They don't care about, like, I'm not, I'm an atheist just kind of casually. I care about Christian nationalism because it's destroying my country, right? But I think I'm as atheist as they are Christian in that they don't really care, you know? Trump, what does Trump believe? What does Pete Hegseth believe? Pete Hegseth might be a zealot.
I've finished 2 of his books, and I'm pretty sure that he believes in everything that he says, like,
Yeah,
deeply. He has twisted
this is
his
the
brain
thing.
into a pretzel of evangelicism that I think it would be really hard to untwist.
So I agree. I think this is an interesting dialectic dichotomy between people that are genuinely motivated by religion. Pete Hegseth might be one of them, depending on how sober he is, and then like people like Trump that I think is kind of too dumb to be motivated by
Mhm.
religion, and then people like Stephen Miller. I talk about Stephen Miller as basically the anthropomorphism of American fascism. That man knows exactly what he's doing. He knows
Mhm.
exactly the history of neo-Nazis trying to live through, and he believes it, but not in a religious way, in a very secular, like boots on the ground, he wants power way. That's why I always look at Stephen Miller and how he's moving to understand it, because the Christian nationalists, right? I think early in like the illegal invasion of Iran, Pete Hegseth wasn't really talking about this religiously, right? He was talking about it in relation to Israel. He's talking about, but then a few weeks in, his pastor spoke and he was like, "This is how it's religious." And that tends to be the dynamic I see, is that religion's not moving the ball, but it forms around the power. And you always have to engage with that. And Trump sees that, right? That's why he took down the picture of him as Jesus. It was a step too far at that moment.
So when my son left on his mission, it was interesting. He went straight into the MTC, the Mission Training Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. And if you're learning a foreign language, you will be inside that MTC for 3 months. And he was not learning a foreign language. He was English speaking in Houston, Texas. So he was only there for, I believe it was 3 weeks. It's fascinating how they completely cut off contact, even with the family. So we didn't get phone calls. We didn't get anything. We got one email once a week. And he had specific instructions in his emails not to be personal about things, but to preach the gospel even to his own family. So I spent 2 years as a mom with the only contact that I had from my son was like, today I was out proselyting and we met an investigator, and here's the scriptures that I read to him, and really nothing personal, nothing emotional. My biggest points of shock as a mom sending a son out on a Mormon mission was just what you talked about, that I always thought that this was just gonna be a spiritual experience, that the Spirit was going to actually guide you. Like in the Bible, when Jesus talks about people being moved by the Spirit and then they open up their mouths and preach. But, the Mormon Church has it down to like a science,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't even know how to explain it to somebody who hasn't been part of, like, having a son on a mission and seeing this training program. It is like the military with just a slight Jesus twist, but that Jesus twist is more about packaging and branding than actual internal stuff. So right in the beginning, he hits his mission field, and I get an email from his mission president's wife, who she's completely insignificant because she's a female. She's just there to cook the meals and put band-aids on people and be supportive little wife of the mission president. I get an email from them, "We have your son safely from the airport." Elder Green, we could no longer call him by his first name. So even in emails as his mom, I would refer to him as Elder Green. Elder Green is now our son. We consider ourselves his actual parents, and we will be your hands in raising this young man further into adulthood in like the gospel. So they took over control, and it was so regimented. Do you know that Mormon missionaries aren't allowed to have couches? They can only sit on chairs. So he had this little apartment, no couch. He had to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Like their whole entire day is completely structured. And it is just so much like pre-planned, pre-packaged stuff. And they, circulate these missionaries in and out and send them out in the mission field so that they can teach everything. It was extremely regimented. As a believing member of the church, and this is where, for me, I always say that I'm like the MAGA Rosetta Stone, because I know exactly what it's like to feel like I'm making a difference in the world. And my oldest son, who, like, do you have kids? You're too young,
No, I do
right?
not. Kids,
Okay.
no.
That first
Inshallah.
baby, like, he is the love of your life in ways that nobody else ever will be. He was the love of my life. He was 18 years old, and he was ripped from our home out into the world, and I felt like I was sacrificing that for God. to make Houston, Texas a better place. That's all I was doing it for. And I know what it's like to feel like you're really changing the world through pushing your faith on other people. But now that I'm out of it, I can look back and see that the Mormon church was using my son and all of the missionaries for a very specific purpose. Their marketing arm is the missionaries, these sweet little kids that go into people's homes and convert them. They gain more power and influence, not just in America, but in the world, and they gain more money. And I think that that's just as simple as it is. I don't think that the church itself really cared that much about saving people's souls. My son did, my family did. I think that the mission president and his wife did, but the Mormon church itself is a corporation. And I think it's all about the money. What do you think? Why are they sending all those little girls out into the world? What are they
Well, I
getting
think
out
there's
of it?
this, yeah, there's what we were talking about before, I think lives within everyone between, do I actually believe what I'm doing or am I doing it cynically? And I think overarchingly, if I'm addressing institutions, and what's so striking about the Mormon church is how successful it is, right? It is wealthier than the Catholic Church. That is mind-boggling. And that doesn't happen because people believe strongly. You know, there are Muslims of hundreds of sects that believe strongly. There are Christians of hundreds of sects that believe strongly. It is because you are tapping into a power base that something else isn't. Mormonism is particularly American. And America is the largest empire the world has ever seen, right? Objectively, America controls most of the world right now. That is changing, that is falling. I would say it's a falling, dying empire, thank God. But it was still very powerful. It was still rising. And when that's happening, if there is a religion, Catholic, right? What's really interesting here is historically, ultra-national fascists, right? That's what fascism is, hated Catholics, right? Famously, fascists in Germany didn't like Catholics because they were seen to have dual loyalty to the Pope. Which is interesting because for really harsh believing Catholics, they're right? At some point, the Pope speaking does have influence over you, as we're seeing right now. And this is why Trump is beefing with the Pope. It's hilarious to see anti-papism come back. Can that happen in Mormonism? Maybe, but not to the same extent because Mormonism is intrinsically American. Whatever Trump
It's
dictates
like apple
Americanism.
pie.
Yes, exactly. And so if you are an ultra nationalist, there is no better religion to intertwine your movement with than the pre-established, very powerful, very wealthy, deeply American movement that your ultra-American movement wants to go on. And nationalism is fundamentally a way of organizing people into power. And this is just another form of a more tightly entrenched ultra-nationalism, right, which ties in the religion. I think white evangelicals try and do this, right? As we were talking about with Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth's pastor believes that the Christians, and very specifically the American Christians, by and large, people in his certain little cult, are the new Israelites, right? They believe the new covenant was very specifically with the new Christians, and only if you believe his certain portion. That's great for an ultranationalist, because now you can use not only ultranationalism, which is kind of just warm, fuzzy feelings for F-15s and apple pie, that's really what America is, and ignoring the genocides we've done. Those are the three tenets: F-15s, American pie, ignoring genocides. But you can also do, oh, look, we have this Bible. And then you can prove your loyalty by moving away from the inherently European Christianity and going towards a very American. So that would be the context I understand it specifically. If you're related to the most powerful empire in the world, that is the wealthiest entity that we've ever seen, and you are helpful to their political project, they'll find a way to incorporate you, right? It is wild. Remember Mitt Romney, right? He was a comparably moderate Mormon, right? He wasn't out here preaching Mormonism. But that was the dynamic back then, where it was wild. No one brought up that he was Mormon. It wasn't a big tenor because Mormonism isn't threatening to even then the burgeoning ultranationalist fascist faction in the conservative movement in America. It actually intertwines very well. And so they may not admit it openly. It might not be a big enough, constituency for them to directly appeal to, but they are not attacking it like they're attacking Muslims. Right. You don't see anti-Mormon bans in America. And that's because they don't like Muslims, because the Muslim religion, as it's culturally understood, which is as inherently foreign, they have all these racist understandings of Islam, is antithetical to the American ultranationalist project. So if I was to narrow my scope into American imperialism and American fascism, it fits so perfectly. And people, specifically white Americans upholding white supremacy, going across the world, preaching to black and brown people that they need to join their cult that is centered in America. I couldn't think of a better way to describe exactly what an ultranationalist project would look like and want.
So the Mormon missionaries, it is interesting that they don't like go to Africa and then they buy clothes while they're there and they try to blend in. I had a boyfriend in college and he went to the Philippines,
Hmm.
and there's the very like tropical type of outfits. Some of the men even wear like a Filipino skirt. I can't remember what it's called. And here he is dressed up, and it is humid and it is hot. And he's on a bike. Him and his companion are out there biking around in
Yeah.
suits, ties. They have to keep their little suit coats on most of the time. Every once in a while, they get special permission to take those suit coats off. And in the extreme heat of summer, they could wear the short sleeve, but they always had the tie. They had everything. They had little, fancy shoes
Yeah.
because they were out there as advertisement, not just for the church. So it wasn't enough for them to have like the Jesus crosses and some type of Jesus-y stuff. What you're saying is that they are promoting a very Americana brand of Christianity. And
Yes.
that works because the Mormon church is spread like wildfire. Do you know that currently the largest growth, over 90% of the Mormon growth, the LDS church, is happening in Africa?
Hmm.
Which is fascinating because my Book of Mormon right here says that brown skin is a curse.
Yep.
And the curse of Cain makes everybody in Africa. It wasn't just pigmentation, it wasn't just proximity to the equator. It was God decided that, Cain and Abel, he
Yep.
cursed Cain. That came through the flood with Ham. And so Mormon doctrine has taught for a long time. I grew up with Black people not being able to go to the temple to get married. There was no Black leadership in the Mormon church when I was a child. So that church is now in Africa. And if you've seen the Book of Mormon, have you seen the Book of Mormon musical?
I have. Yes.
These
Yeah.
squeaky clean little Mormon missionaries dressed in the uniform of capitalism with their little Book of Mormons and Bibles, they're going into very remote areas of all the different nations of Africa, and they are converting entire villages. I
Hmm.
have heard from friends about like 200 to 300 people a day being baptized. I have a cousin right here in Tucson, Arizona, whose daughter was baptized here this year. She's 8. My little niece just turned 8, so she got baptized. And my cousin recently posted to his social media the baptism that happened at the church building that Saturday, I guess it was. And it was my little niece and her dad, my cousin, and then everybody else was African appearing refugees, all of them dressed in very traditional African clothing. And we have tons of refugees here in Tucson from all kinds of different places. For a while, we had a lot of Kenyan refugees. They don't speak English well, they don't understand the culture. But these Mormon missionaries go knock on their doors. They give them an instant community that everybody can be part of. And it's like a way to become American. You join an American church.
Yeah, this is not new, right? The Catholics have the same shtick. They do the same thing. If you go back to British colonial times, right, the Catholics were going around and they were spreading Catholicism. The Catholics still have one of the largest outreach programs, but if you go back into colonial times, they looked a lot like Mormons, right? Because they were
Mhm.
going to, African territory, right? It's basically an unspoken deal, right? I think in this discussion, there's this tendency, as is like common across all discussions in the West of Africa and the Middle East or of West Asia, to see them only as people that are acted upon, right?
Mhm.
But they're also making a deal, right? If you were being colonized, if you had white people coming in and asserting that they were more powerful than you and they could do whatever they want with you, right? Which is what colonizers did. It's complete domination. It is complete white supremacy. Not only over a series of generations is that white supremacy internalized, but even if you don't internally believe it, you have to act within it. And you can assimilate and benefit from that white supremacy, even if you will never be at the top of that hierarchy. Or you can resist. But there are cases, as was true for a lot of colonialism, where resistance meant death, right? And after a few generations where resistance means death, assimilation is the only option, not only literally, right? Not only you cannot physically go fight your colonizers, but you also integrate with their culture and deal with it. And Mormonism, because of how America represents itself and is factually powerful, integrating into the American supremacist mindset does give you material benefits, right? Not only is it that you can say, I'm Mormon to other Mormons, But you can say, I'm not Muslim to people that are scared of Muslims because of white supremacy. You can say, I'm not Hindu to people who don't understand Hinduism because of white supremacy. So it gives you material benefits. And I don't think we can discount that. What will happen, as the Catholic Church is seeing, and as the conservative elements within the Catholic Church are seeing, which is kind of this liberal dynamic, they have a lot of power, they have a lot of privilege, and now they need to appease the people they've welcomed in, right? And so we have had a series of Catholic liberals as Pope, and they haven't been explicitly racist, right? The Catholics greenlit the Crusades. They're an extremely racist institution,
Yes.
right?
Well,
But
and we remember like the Spanish Inquisition and so many things, so many atrocities. It's right here, southern Arizona and northern Mexico. Catholic priests committed incredible atrocities.
Exactly. It's a fluid thing. It's not solid, because in the South America, for example, we had liberation theology, right? Where Catholic priests showed up and out for resistance movements, but as a secondary cause, primarily because the material conditions led to it. And in America, we had Catholic resistance that was crushed, I would argue, following Reagan. Where, do you ever hear the story about the Catholic nun that went and took a hammer to a nuke?
No.
I don't know. It is an amazing piece of history that has been shut out from the American history, because this could be a whole nother episode, but basically Reagan tried to destroy the three bases of the left: unions, students, the religious left. He destroyed unions by exporting all the labor, students by increasing tuition, and a series of other things, and then the religious left by focusing on cultural issues. Because there used to be this big swath of evangelical and Catholics that were like, oh no, Jesus said, like, feed the poor, right? That's, who feeds the poor, not the right. And so
I'm still friends with a bunch of those, like some of my
they're great, but they're
Lutheran
not
friends. So yeah, they're not.
Because Roe v. Wade took over, right? We have these issues, very complicated. But so Catholicism are making these compromises, right? Because you can't make every compromise. You still need to be in tune with whatever the rise of your power is, right? But you need to continue who you have. And I think that's what we're seeing with Mormonism. It's spreading out a lot. It's still maintaining a lot of its core elements. I always describe it as Scientology in suits, even though Scientology are also in suits. Because I think people see Scientology as weird enough, right? They go, oh, how could anyone believe L. Ron Hubbard, right? There's a big volcano and they worship the volcano. But it's like, if you read Mormon theology, it is that weird.
Well, it
right?
reads like Little House in the Prairie. So when you read the stories of the pioneers, and like, could you name a couple Mormons right now? If I asked you, Will, name like 4 Mormons.
I'd go the guy that ran for president.
Mitt
and that's
Romney.
all I know.
Okay.
Mitt Romney.
Do you follow Ballerina Farm? Do you ever watch Ballerina Farm?
No,
No,
I'm
'cause you're
not. I was raised
gay.
Unitarian Universalist. I was raised away from all of these things. I don't know. I know more
right.
witches. So
Well, I know that good for you. I know that a lot of my audience, when you think of Mormons, you will automatically think of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. You'll think of Hannah Neeleman and Daniel and Ballerina Farm and all of their kids. You'll think of maybe Lucky Blue Smith and his wife Nora, who, though she's not Mormon, she's a Mormon adjacent. You think of so many of these squeaky clean people. Mormonism quintessentially was all baked into Americana itself, because it started in the early 1800s. So it's the pioneers, it's gunny sack dresses, it's sourdough bread and jello and those long flowy extensions that I cut off here recently. And so it is packaged in a very American way, because it is an American religion. It was born and raised right here in the very young United States. So it's packaged beautifully. And it is interesting to see how the Mormon church is changing. Do you know about the Mormon garments? How you go through the temple and you get the sacred undergarments that you're supposed to wear. So I was a 20-year-old girl when I got married. And at the time they were a spandex t-shirt and then like biker shorts. And Will, those were my undies for 24 years. You didn't know we were going to talk about underwear, did you?
I expected. I was sitting here. I was like, are we going to talk about the blessed undies? Are we? I do, because that's known. Yeah.
I was told when I went through the temple that God had commanded and designed that these be in a very certain way. So it's funny, your shoulders, just that couple inches right there, is so controversial right now, because we were taught that those shoulders had to be covered up to be modest, and you couldn't roll those garments up. So I live in Arizona. I don't know if have you been to Arizona?
No.
It's 1,000 degrees. It's like just a couple degrees lower than the surface of the sun in July. And you don't want to have a spandex t-shirt and then your bra and the spandex biker shorts underneath whatever you're wearing. So I couldn't wear short shorts. I couldn't wear a tank top. I couldn't wear any, short little sundress. I had to have that underneath everything that I wore night and day throughout my life. That was a covenant that I had made in the temple. And so forever, that was the revelation. God said shoulders are evil. Yeah. And then 2 years ago, as the Mormon church expanded in Africa, and they specifically got to parts of Africa where the traditional dress is very prohibitive of wearing a t-shirt. The women in these cultures wear tank tops and like this specific style of like a loose hand-dyed tank toppy dress. So for the first time in 200 years, the Mormon church decided shoulders are not the devil. So they lopped the garments off and there's tank top garments. And that is specifically because of Africa. And what's funny is at the time, as they were launched, and there's a skirt that goes with it now, so you don't have to wear the biker shorts, and then there's a whole one-piece type of situation. When they launched them, they weren't for sale in the United States, but every little TikTok girly pop in the Mormon church got a hold of them somehow. They had a sister who was living somewhere and they were able to get them. And they just released in America here, I think a few months back. The Mormon church has changed as they've gone out and proselyted and brought in the people in Africa, Mexico, South America, and these other places. And that is so that they can maintain that power because, what did you say? Because force doesn't always work. So is it that they're looking for that sweet spot? They're looking for that sweet spot where, if I'm understanding you right, like they can make some accommodations. They can say, let's go ahead and show your shoulders so that the people in Africa can join the church and wear the garments, go through the temple, be comfortable. We're going to make that accommodation because that's not a meaningful change. That's not going to hurt us. And then that makes the African converts happy.
It allows them to expand their power while maintaining it. And
It allows them to expand their power while maintaining it. Holy hell.
There's always a dynamic there, isn't it? And I also want to note there's this deeply American. I'm still deeply American. I'm a debate bro at my heart. I feel very like white man. Where I'm like, actually, and that's a part of me that I'm trying to get over as a human. But there's a very debate bro.
Same
like
over
Bill
here
Bro.
with the Mormon girl.
Yeah. It's like the atheist, the Reddit atheist. I think I'm a Reddit atheist, but I'm trying to like grow as a person. And there's a very Reddit atheist. Not to offend the Reddit atheist because I don't want to deal with that. But there's a dynamic there where the end of the discussion is, oh, isn't that so interesting that maybe they don't actually believe it? It's like, duh, they don't believe it, right? If I'm making $1 billion off of a belief, I don't care if I believe it. Like, duh. Why are they doing what they're doing? And more importantly, what does that tell you about the other things they're doing? And so I think a lot of what I've really appreciated from a lot of ex-Mormons is I fundamentally want to deconstruct the American project. I don't like a country built on the blood of natives, on the blood of slaves, on the blood of Palestinians. I want to deconstruct that project. And so if I can get ex-Mormons who are deconstructing a deeply American religion, part of that is deconstructing Americanism. Just as part of deconstructing Catholicism is deconstructing the stories you're told about the Crusades. And it makes good anti-fascists and anti-imperialists qua Europe. This can make very good anti-fascists and anti-imperialists qua America, because you realize that, for example, how Mormonism fits into things like manifest destiny and our ownership over California and those areas. These are myths that were built together because they were useful to the power structures at the time. And now, just to land that plane quickly to make it wildly broad and overly vague, America is a global empire, right? America is trying to exert power across the world, right? And that takes compromises, that takes engagements. We have military bases across the world. We are an invisible empire rather than what Britain was, right? Which is one strong single empire, or Portugal was, right? They wanted to convert all of Angola to Catholicism, so it was one Portugal. America is more disparate. It's a little more wild than that. And so you can see the power bases of America, American evangelism, Mormonism, right, American capital, be spread out and change and be a little different everywhere. And not in a way that is cohesive if you're trying to say, Mormons believe this thing, why are they being contradictory? But in a way that makes a whole lot of sense of what is Mormonism's relationship to American power and how is that being expressed? And that makes perfect sense. That it is a very conservative power base because it's a religion, but it still is forced to make accommodations because that is in the interest of American power. Who wants to take over Africa, right? They're saying China wants all of Africa. They want it desperately.
Well, I sometimes feel, and I want to hear what you think about this, like Turning Point USA, the Heritage Foundation, and everything that is the core of everyone who's still in MAGA right now, Erica Kirk, etc. I feel like they are directly copying whatever playbook the Mormon Church has.
Yes.
There is no difference between going into college campuses and branching into high schools. We have some high schools here in Arizona that now have little TPUSA, youth groups that are happening. There's no difference between having those charismatic leaders as the podcasters, just like the Mormon church had the prophets, and having very specific control of how people look and thought policing everybody, tying into a nonstop drip of information from the podcasts and other media sources. There's no difference between Turning Point USA and some of these other groups and the Mormon church. I literally feel like they've copied them. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Well,
Not necessarily
okay.
that they've copied them,
Yeah.
but that there are incredible inherent similarities between the way that all of these groups are now operating. They're all
Yes.
acting like Mormons, all of
Yes.
them.
I'm going to go shortly, super high level, and I want you to keep me on track. Okay. So
Mhm.
what is the story of Mormonism? Go west, right? It's manifest destiny, right?
Mhm.
He from New York. We got to go west. That's manifest destiny. So the mythology of it, manifest destiny is violence against the natives, right? So you need zealots to do violence because that's risking their life. So you built a religion around manifest destiny. It's the Holy Land. Let's go take it. It's what we're seeing in the West Bank right now with zealots, the far right-wing conservatives being the settlers. And then, so you need zealots to do the boots on the ground, and they need to be the boots. But then you need the suits. You need the liberals to say, okay, we have this land. There are still some natives. We can't afford to kill all of them. We can't afford to do all of this. That's what the liberals are in Israel. And so what that dynamic is of fascism, ultranationalism is taking the zealots who used to be out in the periphery of the empire, in Utah, for example, or in the West Bank,
Mhm.
and since the empire is falling, it's coming in on itself. All of that violence is coming in on itself. All the military violence that we built up over 100 years to take control of South America through Operation Condor, etc., is coming in on itself. And you need the ideology to match, right? So we used to have ultranationalism. We love F-15s, right? Now we have ultranationalism. We love Charlie Kirk, right? Because we're
And we love
building
trad
those
wives,
sets.
and we love traditional
Exactly.
families, and
Exactly.
we love
Oh,
going to church on Sunday. We love reading the Bible. We love kids
those
that
are
are
forms
focused
of
on
control.
Jesus.
Those are forms of control of the imperial core. Exactly. So what was an ideology to take over the imperial periphery, right? So the periphery is the whatever you're expanding into. So for Mormonism, it was
Mhm.
the California, Utah, etc. America, it was South America, the Middle East, etc., invading Iraq, etc. Now you needed it here, and that's exactly what fascism is. It's imperialism come home to roost, and you need the matching ideology. And really, Turning Point USA looks like that. It expresses outward, right? AFD, the Alliance Defending Freedom, a far right wing hate group that they did the recent anti-trans or anti-conversion or pro-conversion therapy Supreme Court case. They're evil. They're behind like most legal
Which is
matters.
so heartbreaking. I have
Yes.
friends who've gone through conversion therapy, and I have heard the stories, and I cannot even imagine. As a woman who has a male partner, I cannot imagine being thrown in conversion therapy to make me no longer attracted to the love of my life. Imagine we did that to heterosexual people. Nobody can be hetero anymore. So we're going
It's
to put you
direct
through
abuse.
conversion therapy. It's horrifying. So
Yeah.
so they're behind that, and they are using some of the same tactics. So what used to be like as a prepper and all of this, I was full-blown white supremacist. I was Klan adjacent for many years. I was obviously Christian nationalist because Jesus, was going to come back to America, and the gospel was founded here in America, and the Garden of Eden was here in America. So I was 100% the ultra Christian nationalist. But the group that I was part of was very much on the peripheral. We were not the mainstream that were in charge of
Yes.
anything. So just because of the loss of control,
Well,
now
you
that's
can't
now
be, right?
front and center.
Because it's hard to expand power with being what is like intense, right? For example, like anti-communists trying to invade Venezuela or a bunch of other places. They can't go in and say, we're going to violently enforce white supremacy, right? Because you won't get the liberal elements of America on your side, right? But
They're
you
saving
need
people from these bad leaders.
Exactly. Exactly. But who's going to actually do that? It's the people who are deeply entrenched in white supremacy and don't see the value in black and brown bodies, right? It's one thing to greenlight an invasion. It's another thing to do it. And you need two concurrent ideologies to do the different ones. And so what Turning Point USA is trying to set up is say, hey, we have these wackos, these people that believe wild things, and they have nowhere to go because America isn't. I mean, we're invading Iran, right? We'll keep trying to do this, but I think everyone can agree we're not expanding in the same way we did from the 60s to the 2000s, right? It's just the gambit's over. So now what do? Right? What happens? And this was true of fascist Germany. They were expanding. They tried to have an empire. They tried to expand during World War II. They tried to have Namibia. They committed genocide in Namibia. And then all of those people went home and they all were embarrassed. And what does an embarrassed imperialist do? They become a fascist. So that's really what's happening. And what we're kind of observing from the outside is the ideologies of those fascists shifting from, I need to go to Namibia and commit genocide in the name of German supremacy, right, to, hey, we should take parts of Poland actually because of German supremacy. And instead of we need to go kill natives, or maybe we need to go civilize the natives, we need to find people to civilize here. And what Trump's answer to that is, we need to civilize the immigrants by deporting them. We need to civilize the Muslims by deporting them, right? It's not just civilization, it's also expulsion.
Well, I feel like that happening as an atheist, feminist, ex-trad wife, like all of that stuff, the war on the woke, and that was the title of Charlie Kirk's book. Have you read Charlie Kirk's book, How to Beat the Woke and Win the West? It's horrifying, and I have a hard time understanding exactly why the liberals in America became the enemy of Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA, and everything that MAGA is doing right now. But it is a chronic virtual civil war. We are at war right now in America, and it's MAGA. They've waged war on everybody who doesn't step in line with them, and that's why. Because they have to get control of those people. They can't go out now. Yeah, we're not manifest destiny anymore. We're not growing through those means. We're not, stealing Mexico. I live in Arizona, so this is stolen land. It's stolen from multiple First Nations people. It's stolen from Mexico, and did Spain once have where I live? I don't even know. But America stole it from everybody. So we can't do that anymore. So instead, they are trying to subjugate me.
Exactly.
And you.
Yeah. The colonizers need to colonize, because we built a cult of violence with Manifest Destiny. We built a cult of violence even up to George W. Bush calling the Iraq War a crusade, right? I don't think George W. Bush believes shit, but he's tapping into something in America, which is a pre-existing ideological base to do violence against the other. And when the empire, when it is profitable, it is no longer profitable for the empire to go invade Iran, as we are seeing. We are losing really hard in that war. People see that and they go, okay, this will keep going. People still believe this. We've indoctrinated people into a cult of violence. Where do we push that? And where is that helpful? Anti-immigrant sentiment is a great way to do it. We could describe why billionaires and oligarchs care about, oppressing immigrants, keeping a permanent underclass to consistently exploit, but they have this arsenal, right? And they need to use it. You don't build guns if you're not going to make them. That's what we learned from World War I and World War II. When you have weapon buildup, it's going to be used. And we have a huge amount of weapon buildup from the past 70 years of American exceptionalism and American imperialism. And it's so fascinating to see how Mormonism goes into that, because it's such a small sect, but it's so particular. And it really makes a good vanguard for that arsenal, right? It makes a good vanguard for who they can maintain. They're well organized and they can maintain power, but they need to keep expanding. They need to maintain it. My overall thesis with a lot of this capital is they might jump ship, right? We see billionaires jumping ship, investing in China, investing in other places, right? I don't think the Mormon Church can do it. And what happens if you can't jump ship because of how you are fundamentally of an American cult is you just keep going more radical. And that gets real nasty really, really quickly. And that's kind of what we're seeing. I don't think the Mormon Church is getting more liberal.
They're not there, but they are repackaging things. So they're talking now about women having rights and working, and everybody's in support of that. And it's interesting. They are kind of repackaging, but then at the root, none of the doctrines have changed. Nobody's come out and said, no, the Book of Mormon, where it talks about black skin being a curse, that's not true. That was a mistake. We shouldn't have said that. Joseph Smith was drunk that day or something. They've never really disavowed any of the doctrines. They're just kind of repackaging everything, but it's like lipstick on a pig, right? So I have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
What is foundationally wrong with colonialism and imperialism?
It's an artificial hierarchy meant to maintain power, I would say. Why can't I murder you and steal all your stuff? That's unfair. It's, you have stuff and I would like it. Yeah, that's fundamentally what it is. And then the reason we spend so much time talking about it is because the need for especially white Europeans seemingly to go and steal and kill so much on such a great scale.
In the name of civilization.
In the name of civilization, because civilization is when you enslave and abuse in many ways everyone else that doesn't have your exact skin color, and many people that do. Because reminder, many colonists were not. Racism is a 16th and 17th century creation. I wanted to mention this, is the fact that Mormonism is doctrinally racist is surprising and absurd. I will make a wild claim, but Catholicism, if you go back to the 1400s, or maybe really the 1300s, was not doctrinally racist. It did not comment on race, unless you go back to the Old Testament and I would say misinterpret it. And that is because race, properly understood in the European context, was created by Spanish and French colonizers to justify its particular power hierarchy. And so it is deeply American that it is doctrinally racist. And that is wild to me.
Oh, fascinating. I've never thought about that before. Yeah, the Catholic
Well,
Church
many people don't
doesn't.
know. I was just listening to a lovely podcast called Revolutions About the Haitian podcast, and there were this is a right-wing talking point that they point out all the time, dishonestly, but there's a truth to it, which is that in Haiti switched back and forth quite a few times between being legally racist, i.e. black and white people on this basis of being black and white had different legal rights, and not being legally racist, where what defined you was the capital you owned. Because there was a large portion of like black former slaves historically that owned slaves. And so so when you see this particular concept of a particular thing, it just strikes me as so colonial to a level that we can recognize in Israel, right? When we see the categories and hierarchies and in different sects of Judaism and different sects of Islam or different ethnicities within Israel that are so artificial and so foreign to us. It should strike you equally as foreign that there is this. But I think most Americans go, oh, everyone was racist back then. It's like, well, yes, but it's a very particular context, a very particular thing.
So, Will, does it matter if imperialism is being executed through actually going out and causing harm to people? So you're using weapons, you're waging war, or if it's the cute little Mormon missionary girls that we talked about in the very beginning that are colonizing and imperializing the world. Does it matter?
Yeah.
Or is the end result still violence?
This hits on something which I think always comes down to the form of which we're talking. If I could go and armed resistance the colonizers in the 1800s of British South Africa, I would. That's great. That's fantastic. Unfortunately, I'm a propagandist online. I can only talk about art and vibes and stuff. And so ultimately, we got to meet them with the tools we have. And it does matter, right? They're different things. The soldiers that come in marching behind the Catholic missionaries is a different enemy, right? But understanding the ideology and being certain to deconstruct the ideology that allows most Americans to sit back and watch this war in Iran and go, they're Muslim, they must be zealots. They must be undeserving. We must bomb a girls' school in the name of religion, right? They don't have to literally believe it, but that normalization, it allows people who want to use violence to use it. And it allows them to suppress anyone who rightfully would be able to defend themselves. And thank God that is going down. That is not, in America, less people are falling for it, is changing. But they're not separate phenomena. They're inherently related phenomena, and one is preemptive to the other. So obviously, I would prefer someone convert to Mormonism than be murdered by, American Empire. But one enables the other, and so.
Well, and I feel like it's still soft subjugation.
Yes.
Because if you're now wearing the Mormon garments and paying 10% of your income to the Mormon church and going to the Mormon temple and serving the Mormon God and all those things that the people are, then your money, for one thing, is being extracted from your home country, that 10%. And there have been some nations, I think it was Australia last year, that tried to put the kibosh on that. Like, you can't pay tithing to the Mormon church and then have that go to Utah. Money has to stay in our country.
Capital control.
Yeah, it's still a soft subjugation. You're still bowing the knee to the powers that be in Utah. So yes, certainly superior to being murdered, but not a good situation overall. And for me, I'm just heartbroken at the loss of culture, the loss of language. I see religion as an invasive species. And because of our modern world, just because of plane travel and just the internet and all these different things, religions now in massive ways are able to disseminate their doctrines and their cultures in ways that they never were before. The Catholic Church, it took thousands of years for the Catholic Church to spread in the way that it did. Islam, again, thousands of years. Mormonism in 200 years, boom. Richest religion on the face of the planet, and they are culturally impacting major swaths of the world. And I just feel like we're at this kind of crossroads as a species. Tell me what you think about this, where we have enough access to information now, we live in the information age, that we understand the negative consequences of shifting people's society, their beliefs, their culture, their rituals. And for a Mormon missionary to now go into Africa or go to Milan, Italy, or wherever and convert someone and take them away from their traditions and isolate them from their tribe, we understand that that's a bad thing. But we're in this kind of funny transition still where we still have those traditions from the past, being Mormonism and Christianity and Catholicism, et cetera. And we're still kind of operating from that standpoint with that understanding that, well, this is negative. Maybe the Indian schools shouldn't have existed, and maybe we shouldn't have snuffed out the entire Mayan and Aztec civilizations, et cetera. But we're still doing it.
So I'm from the American South. This will go leftward shift, but I promise it's related. I'm from the American South, and there's a fantastic radical tradition in the American South of Black nationalism, which is deeply understood in the American psyche. Fundamentally, it goes along these lines, and they have fantastic work. I recently, one of the few books I read, I don't read very much, but one of the few books I read or listened to was Assata Shakur's biography. Absolutely fantastic. It's called Assata. And when you read this, she's, first of all, a fantastic writer, but also touches on these ideas of decolonizing the mind and the relationship that, yes, religion in some oppressed communities, especially across South America, has offered a way to decolonize, a organizing principle along which to decolonize, similar to how Islam was provided an organizing principle for certain Black national groups to decolonize, because it was the power relationship of those ideas, right? And so I'm always reticent to reject all religions equivalently and equally, primarily because I can see how that acted as a force of colonization in certain areas. But I am very interested in the way that especially the dominant forces, Christianity, Christian nationalism, have been used to. So yes, certainly it's gross, and it's also harmful when we are expanding the dominant religion in a way that erases and removes abilities for a big powerful thing for some communities that maintain their culture. I think of Botswana, which maintained a democratic culture pre and post colonialism. A reason they were able to be so successful was because they maintained their culture. And when the colonizers left, they weren't left with a vacuum. They still had their ideologies to organize themselves upon. And an organized colonized peoples are much more dangerous to the colonizer, right? An organized imperialized people are much more dangerous. And that's why you find radical factions within formerly colonized areas, is because the most organized will win. And a primary goal of colonizers that know how to do it, I've read Henry Kissinger, one of the best colonizers that was there, right? He was very good at it. He's an evil man, but he's very good at being evil. And his goal was to keep chaos in the area, right? To destroy any organizing principle, not complete domination, right? But chaos, and providing alternative religions that you control. How many Africans will stay Mormon? We'll see. I don't know. But it does destroy the other organizing principles, right? If we're going to isolate an effect that really, really matters, it's the fact that they can destroy any ability for them to resist, even if, and by offering them this, kind of carrot on a stick, you get to benefit a little more from white supremacy because you're part of the white supremacist ideology and religion.
Oh, I feel like that's exactly what's happening across the continent of Africa with the Mormon Church. They get to benefit
across
just a
the
little
world,
bit more
really.
from proximity.
Indonesia, around Middle East. Yeah, we have it's the dynamic that's around everywhere. The more you study history, the more it's all the same. It's all horrifying. But yeah.
So, Will, here's my final question for you. Is there a solution to this? So let me frame it like this. If you were walking along the beach and you found a genie in the bottle and you got one wish and you could fix all this and literally make the ultimate fantasy to decolonize, get rid of imperialism, get rid of subjugation, that hierarchy that oppresses people, what would that look like? What would the end result be?
I'm the most annoying person to ever ask this question. I'm a law student Marxist. All of those are allergic to straight answers about what we want.
A straight answer isn't reality.
Exactly, because my politics is, how do we get to a better world? And how do we name harmful ideologies and harmful things? And how do we build better systems that work for more people? Obviously, the ideal is everyone thrives the most. Everyone is fed, everyone is housed, everyone lives. We live in the diverse world we do. We live within the contradictions that will continue to exist between religions that we are fighting for. What's funny is there's an alliance of sorts between the left atheist community, which is anti-Christian nationalist, and the Muslims in America who are being oppressed by Christian nationalism. That's a contradiction within the movement, but that's a beautiful contradiction, right? Because it allows us to liberate ourselves. The one thing that annoys me personally as a human being more than other things is how illiterate Americans are. I get it. I understand it. I know why it's happened. So maybe a higher literacy rate amongst the imperialized peoples would just make my job easier. But fundamentally, the politics is working through this diverse coalition that is the world, especially within the imperial core, and saying, how do we fight against the interests of the empire, and how do we fight for like collective liberation? And that looks like attacking the constructs of that imperialism through religion, through economy, right, through politics, through ultra nationalism and personality cults like Trump. And it's an ongoing system and process. It's an ongoing labor. I guess, like me personally, if I got a wish, I wish I could like have like 200 times more time on this earth to do that like beautiful work, and like not sleep and just like try to fix this shit. Because nothing's ever going to be perfect. I'm not going to agree with everyone, so I wouldn't want to wish away all the people I disagree with. I'll just go have a heated argument with them, you know?
Then what's America going to look like? What are you going to turn it into?
To answer, that's easy. I don't want America to exist. This is going to be my unpopular opinion. I do not want the United States of America to exist. Just like I don't want Israel to exist, just like I didn't want Rhodesia to exist. I am rabbit-eyed when I hear this question, because it's a great question. I want all of the imperialized nations of America, from like those with the Black radical tradition, the Chicana nation, the indigenous nations, the Hawaiian nation, right? The Philippines got their freedom. Hawaii hasn't yet. Puerto Rico hasn't yet. So I don't want the United
Free
States.
Hawaii, absolutely.
Free
Yeah, I say
Hawaii.
that too. So it's funny, I
Exactly.
get in a lot of arguments with people who want me to join the cult of the left because I've left MAGA and I'm not mean enough and I'm not, argumentative enough and I don't support enough candidates. But I really think that I'm a land back anarchist and I'm just waiting for society to collapse so that we can find something better. And then people will say, oh, but we have to have civilization because of epidurals and cancer treatment and antibiotics and transportation and all those things. But I just don't know that we're happier. I don't know that we have a better quality of life. Hopefully, knock on wood, nobody's going to drop a nuke anytime soon. Hopefully, that never happens. I do believe that we can keep some of the trappings of modern life and that we can build a more sustainable, less hierarchical, less oppressive system. But yeah, in my ultimate fantasy, 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm laying in bed thinking, what would I like the world to look like? I don't know. I think it would be prehistory. I think it would be before the Sumerians or anyone did anything and we were just tribal. I think humans were happier. We have no way of knowing that because they didn't leave a written record, but
I'm certainly not an anarchist, but that is a much longer conversation, which makes everyone infinitely unhappy. But we are interested in our aims, which is destroying these unjustified, harmful hierarchies, one of which is the existence of Americanism. And that's why Mormonism is such an interesting path into it, because it's really just, masturbatory Americanism. So
it is. So do you think there's a time in the future when we aren't going to be so focused on American exceptionalism and we can just coexist with the rest of the world and live in a little bit of peace and harmony? Do you think that we can have that on the pipes here in the next, let's say, 50 years?
I think I'm an optimist. I really am. And I think it's easy for me to say I'm a privileged white man. I think it'll get bad for some people, right? We still have ICE concentration camps. We have extreme violence within our country that is ongoing. But I think from what I've read and understood, that violence has been there. It just hasn't been affecting white people, right? That's really, I not to be snarky, not to be annoying, right? And like that deserves more commentary, whatever. But it's true, right? We've had a military state for the past 100 years, and it's been against Black and brown people. We were built on, these concentration camps existed. They were called boarding schools for the indigenous people. Like it's not the same, but it's not new in form. And what I'm seeing is the death of that system, right? Fascism has never outlived its country, right? The German Empire fell, and then fascism killed it, right? The Italian Empire, the fascism in Italy was the death of the Italian Empire. And so I don't see any reason to believe that it's not in America. And the world gets better for everyone except for a few white Americans by and large, and a lot of oppressed Americans. But for the world, they get better. We have fewer Iraqs, we have fewer Vietnams, we have fewer Cambodias in terms of wars. And we have fewer Operation Condors. And I think people that are treating this like a massive expansion of American militarism haven't looked at Operation Condor. I don't know how you can look at Pinochet's rule and think that we haven't seen this before. So I'm an optimist. I think life everywhere but America, and the places that America lashes out on, Venezuela, Iran, right? It gets better. And our proxies in Israel, I think Palestinians, unfortunately, I'm not an optimist for the Palestinian nation. I think the genocide will be more successful than it has been, unfortunately. Foucault was right, as well as the other writers that I forget the name of, that fascism is the dying gasp of an empire, right? And that gasp is dangerous. That gasp kills a lot of people, and that can't be undermined. But it is a dead empire after that, and life is better after a dead empire. So I think that's beautiful and what I hope for.
All right, Will, you are a wealth of knowledge. I love your thoughts. Once again, I'll link everything so that you guys can find Will in the description. And you're going to send me some links to books, etc. Any good reads that you think that my audience would enjoy. We'll put that all down in the description, as well as my beautiful Patriarchy Sucks t-shirt.
That's fantastic.
These are selling like hotcakes, and they're just kind of fun to wear. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And thank you just for trying to make a difference in the world in all the areas that I have people that watch me from Scotland and New Zealand and South
Shout
America and
out.
everywhere. And there are so many people that just have good hearts that really want a good future. So, will you promise to come back in 50 years? Let's see, you'll be in your 70s, but I'll be 100 by then. And we're going to revisit this and see if fascism was indeed the death of the American empire, and if on the other side there was something a little bit more bright.
That is my only hope, and I appreciate you having me on so much. This was fantastic fun, even if a bit dire at times. But that is the work, and so thank you so much for having me on. It was a great conversation.
I think everything calls for dire times. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye. Mwah.